Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at Broken Lutes. So this is a game that I think it's still in the league rotation, and it's the first standard I've ever viewed in some time. So this is an interesting map because it has segmented, shall we say, right? The fronts are separated. These dividers. Sure, you could say you have these ocean tiles. And so what ends up happening, if you could think about it, is one, there's an overall dividing of the map, and then even amongst that there is different segments of the map where fighting is going to happen. And so what this is going to lead to is that, for instance, you are blue. If you're on this tile, you are uncommitted. If you're, let's say, on this tile, you're committed to that front. So the uncommitted tiles have the advantage of they can either, your tank, for instance, can either go to either side to reinforce, threaten either side, do anything it wants. However, if you're on, let's say, the forest tile, you're somewhat committed to that side, because if you're trying to get to the other side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's going to take you a full turn just to switch onto that front. So once you sent them into that front, it's kind of a bit of a hassle to move them to a different front. However, if your units are not committed to that front, then you have the ability to front switch. So other than that, this is a map that utilizes 2 sets of comm towers, and they are all the way separated by them lonesome. Not only that, it's also the only airport, so getting to this island at some point is going to be important in the match. So the nice thing about an extra comm tower is it's going to speed up the game a little bit, and it's going to leave certain thresholds open to take advantage of in brawling. And copters may be a good thing to have too, pretty much because copters are the only thing that can go over these mountains. And if you really wanted, they could front switch between both halves of the map, so this side and this side. You could divvy them up to either side if you were so inclined. However, you're probably going to stick to one, and to be honest, it's most likely going to be the strong side, just because the reinforcement time from the airport is going to be the best. And there is the strong side. So this is a strong side because not only it has 2 bases, but this base in particular has no good way of getting the vehicles to the weak side at all. They can get some infantry. Infantry are going to be slightly slowed because of those mountains, so you're not really going to get vehicles at all to that weak side in the early game. You could build a lander, but landers are quite pricey. Just for reference, I'm not going to put out the reinforcement lines for this one. However, you can anticipate that it's going to be something like this. Something like that-ish. Sure. That's a horrible drawing. But you get the idea where the front lines are going to most likely be. 2 more things let's go over. If we're going to say we're green, for instance, from this base, let's just kind of count how far we can go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if that puts you on this tile. This tile gets you, which front are you most likely to want to go into? To this front. And so if you are blue, going from this base, you're gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Which front are you most likely gonna want to fight onto? It's most likely this front. So each base has a preference of what side it wants to be on, although that's not going to be the end all be all on this map, but it's something that you may want to consider if you can get. One last thing, we're just gonna touch on COs really. So I think Olaf is probably the most ideal on this map, and that's because of the amount of green you end up seeing on this map. It's not just at the front lines, it's pretty much everywhere through the reinforcements. And so why is that important? Because it's going to slow down reinforcements. It's going to slow down your initial retaliation after the power. It's going to be quite decimating on the whole. However, Eagle's probably not a slouch. If you play him right, you could probably get advantage on Olaf. But we shall see. We shall see.
Ready, go!
Okay, so after this turn, let's just look at this. Robo has decided to build a tank as his opener. Standard opener, nothing wrong with it. But look at Hulio. Hulio decided to go with 3 infantry. He decided to skip the vehicle. This kind of hints into his mentality of how important he considers the capture game to initially be on this map. He really values it, so he makes sure he has enough infantry to do what he wants. Okay, so Hulio did the double tank build, and that's pretty good. I like it. Both sides being offensively inclined, being able to deal with this tank, as well as being able to make threats of your own on this front. Secondly, look at the ports that each player went with. Robo went with his left port, and Hulio went with his left port. So already there's 2 ports where you could build your black boat from to get to the island. And already we see there's going to be a slight difference. And I'm going to give the edge to Hulio on this because on the strong side, there's going to be more units overall, and therefore it's going to be a less overall cost to send a unit to go capture that. Whereas Robo is busy over here with his infantry. This infantry usually is the same one that's going to go over to that island. And so you have an infantry that's just not going to be useful on this front. And that's his weak side. Usually you do want as many units overall on your weak side to help resist any push from your opponent. So that's why I like Hulio's option a little bit better. Okay, so let's just look at Robo's build real quick from the previous turn. You can see he has 2 tanks, and it looks like he's trying to set up to brawl maybe. Only hang up is the best thing to have done in this case, which is to build an additional tank. So he couldn't afford to build a tank because he decided to build a black boat instead. So that forgoes him an additional tank, so maybe not brawl, because I don't think that would be great unless you kept going with the chain. And keep in mind that he also base skipped. So Hulio also base skipped to make sure he could get his second tank on this side. Both of them base skipped to ensure the tanks are going to be able to deal with the threats. Let's see how it plays out. Okay, so Hulio has a nice little advantage, I should say, down here on the left, because he has a tank that's one, stopping that infantry, but it has free reign to harass these infantry because there's no vehicle left to just stop it on this front. It's free to harass infantry till his heart is content. This is one of the nice things about making sure you, to some degree, divvy up your units. Because if you put all your tanks onto one side, sure, you can win, but you're not going to win as fast as you might lose on your weak side. Especially when you can tell exactly what your opponent has. Okay, so looking over here. Let's just see, is it time to push in yet? I would say no, it's not time to push in yet. Because this is on a city, I don't see a good way to deal enough damage initially, even in combination with this tank, in which you can do more damage this initial turn than your opponent will be able to reciprocate. So I would say, even though you're trying to threaten your opponent, maybe just kind of keep each other at bay until you have more units before you start to rumble. Okay, Robo decided to go in here. I right away don't like this decision. I believe it's a 33% chance you OHKO it, and unless you OHKO it, it's a loss on Robobird, and mainly because Hulio is on a city of his own color, so it's going to get healed up to 3, and then Robo left this tank right here on a bridge, and I do believe with one comm tower it should get knocked down to 3-ish, most likely. And if you put I think this guy, if you put this guy on the city here and take the hit, there'll be minimal damage back to him, and then he'll be up overall in unit value. So he does make a tank down here to counter this tank. It's about time. However, it's protecting most of the infantry. Yeah, it's covering most of the infantry. I mean, maybe he can go on the city. That doesn't seem like such a horrendous idea. But up here, he moves out the way. Boom. Okay, so this is why I didn't like this move up here. Or I should say, it was a very risky move. So, again, we have 3 HP, 3 HP. Let's say those cancel out. You have 9 HP versus 7. Hulio clearly came out in the lead during this interaction. Now, Robo doesn't have enough firepower to destroy this guy. And this tank is going to get healed Hulio's next turn by 2 HP. If they keep fighting, Robo is going to lose for sure. His best option now is to just bail. And he goes on the city. Still within the tank's reach. Although, hitting a tank on the city and then being right next to a shoal, it's not great. But this is nice that Hulio is still disrupting Robo's infantry. Weakened infantry can't capture. It helps him in the long run. So, with this capture phase down here, the one issue I see is Robo has not captured this yet. Meanwhile, on the opposite side, Hulio has captured his second port. So, if we think about how Robo can go about capturing this, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3. It's going to be about 4 days for an infantry from here to cap this. Now, that already is going to be a couple days that he's not getting that income. But this guy seems to already be spoken for, sending him into the center. He kind of needs infantry in the center, especially because of what's going down over here. Also, let's just kind of look at what happened down here. He did fire on this tank, but then he used his 2 infantry to further chip it down. My hang up with this is that you willingly just chipped your 2 more infantry. So these 2 infantry, if they try to capture anything, they're going to be delayed. And you're going to lose out on a little bit more income. For instance, this guy probably could have gone over here and captured this. This guy probably could have tried to fight over here. The issue is, now that he has these infantry chipped, they're going to be easier to knock off, harder to get captures. This is not free damage on the tank. There's a cost to it. Then up here, he does run away, blocks him with infantry. Great. This guy runs over here. However, he can still get hit from there. You still have ways to deal with this tank. The issue with running away with the tank is that if there's a tank initially next to you, that the opponent's tank also has 6 movement. It can follow you. So you need some form of blocking to make sure that it survives. He runs away over here, but keep in mind, he doesn't have anything blocking this tank, and so this guy can just follow up. The one nice thing about moving this back is that if he does go back for the hit, it does move him closer to your reinforcement base. So the base, any unit from here is more easily able to reinforce. That's one of the nice things about moving back, but keep in mind, this guy still is going to die because he has no blocker. Understand that over here that you do want to get rid of the units of Eagle, even in the low ones, because they still have some use. However, I wonder if it would have been worth it to try to delay this cap or something, because essentially you have these 2 infantry just kind of hung out to dry, and they're probably not going to survive. And the nice thing is, over here, this tank gets to harass infantry some more, so that's going to be nice. So we see 2 different ways of utilizing the black boat afterwards. So Robo is just using it to drop off here and give more to this front over here. Meanwhile, Hulio is taking the scenic route, going all the way probably over here, maybe even over here, to drop off those infantry. And then these guys just get picked off. Oh no, that was not a good move. Okay, let's rewind and just kind of look at this. In this scenario, do you think it's a good idea to attack into Hulio? The correct answer is no. Why? It's because, in the simplest terms, look at how many tanks there's going to be. You have 2 tanks that can fight into this. How many tanks are here to fight into them? This guy right here covers both of these tanks, so that's included in the fight. You have 2, 3. You have 3 tanks versus 2 tanks. So this is not going to go over well. It's going to be in the advantage of Hulio. There's also this 3rd tank that Robo has. However, it's not going to be able to fight this turn. So really, this is going to be 3 turns versus 2. This is going to be advantage of Hulio. This to me is a blunder. You see now, so let's say he did get rid of a tank, sure. However, it's now tank, chip tank versus 2 healthy tanks. And one's on a shoal, one's on a plane. It's not going to end up well. So this is one of the nice things that, and it happened from the first brawl here, that where I think he made an error in choosing to brawl a little early. Once you lose in the brawl like this, once you start losing, Hulio, even though this is his weak side, sees that, and he keeps making tanks, because now that he has the initial victory, if he keeps fighting into the brawl, he's going to win more and more. Even though it's his weak side, he continues to make tank after tank after tank, feeding into this, because he will win this as long as he keeps doing this. So this hit over here is kind of important because he really does not want this full HP infantry getting on the HQ in the next turn. That's going to be more of a headache than to trying to deal with it now. Even though it brings him from 7 to 6, he really can't afford to have this guy go on it. Although, it's going to heal up to 8 next turn, still be a threat. The nice thing is, even attacking this infantry, still can't do anything next turn. So right here, the only way to stop this is for him to throw this infantry at it. So now maybe he didn't even need to use the tank. Oh, tank helps, I guess. But this guy is now, his only job is to stop this flip, because this is going to be more of a reliable thing than trying to go for the HQ. And more important, in the short term. Okay, look what those 2 tanks just did. Brought him down to 8 and 1, so that's 5. So now it's Robo's next turn. It's 1 healthy tank and a 5 HP tank, even though it doesn't add up like that, versus a healthy tank and an 8 HP tank. If they keep fighting tank on tank on tank, Hulio's going to win. Robo, understanding this to some degree, knows he has to figure something out, so he sends 2 tanks in. Ideally, I would like to send an additional tank in here, but he really needs the tanks over here because he's blundered so harshly. And the thing I like over here is a mech. Now, normally mechs are a pain on this map because they're so difficult to get to the front line. However, as a defensive tool, it's really good because you can make up a nice little wall, a defensive wall, and your opponent can't really push into it. Now, the reason you like tanks on this a little over mechs is because of the mobility. You can plant, let's say, your tank here on this square, and it's not committed to either side. You get to choose based off of what you need. Mechs, because it's so difficult to front switch on a map like this, they're pretty committed to wherever they are. Unless it's a critical tile, you can't really front switch them too easily. So you got a nice little defensive wall. There's no real way to really push in to hit both of these units. Doing pretty well. As well as he has this tank in reserve that's non-committed. So even if this guy tried to go around to stop these captures, there's a tank that can deal with that. At that point, he realizes he's not coming back from it. Mostly because Eagle as a CO, he can be down a little bit and still make a comeback once the power hits. But once he has all indicators in his favor, it is going to be almost impossible for Olaf to even come back from that, even with his power. Olaf at this point would be relying that his opponent makes several blunders to compensate. On the whole, I would say there was the initial blunder that caused Hulio to gain the upper hand on the weak side, and then it was definitely the second blunder that really just set him over the edge, and he couldn't come back from. One of the best things I can say is, if you're concerned or not, go into the movement planner, make your turn, and then take your opponent's turn to the best of what you think his best options are, and see who comes out on head. If you come out ahead, then maybe it's not a bad idea. If he comes out ahead, think of another plan. That's not going to work out. I would say, though, Hulio did a good job overall realizing his opponent's mistakes and capitalizing on that. Good job, Hulio. You played well. And thanks for watching.